Welcome to the Bros Talking Ball podcast, and this is our first episode of the new year. In today's episode, we'll be covering at the beginning, we'll talk a little bit about the college football playoffs, we'll recap last night's game, and then predict what's going to happen tonight in the Texas-Ohio State game. I don't know when this will be posted, but we are recording right before that game on the 10th. I believe it kicks off at 6:30, so here in a couple of hours. And then after we recap those, we'll go over to the wild card games and we'll make some predictions. And we'll have kind of like a little same game parlay for each one of the games of the afternoon. And so, with a lot of games to cover, I'm just going to hop straight into it. And I'm just going to kind of start with what I thought on that Notre Dame Penn State game and just give my recap. And then you can go ahead and give your thoughts on the game. Honestly, I didn't watch much of it. I watched the second half, like most of the second half. I kind of saw bits and pieces of the first half, but it looked like, I mean, both teams are definitely, very well defensively in the first half when I was watching. There didn't seem to be much scoring possessions, and then it looked like Notre Dame just caught fire early in that second half, and it just kind of went on from there. But I mean, it was a close game all around. I feel like what it came down to is I feel like Penn State just made more mistakes than Notre Dame, and I think it came down to that Drew Aller pick. There was really no reason to force a ball up there. You could have gone to overtime. There was time left on the clock. Your running game was what was carrying you offensively, anyways. And so I just think, I don't know, looking back at that play, I could see where he was going. There was definitely a big play there, but I feel like that's a tough pass to hit, and that's one you don't want to force, especially bringing Notre Dame into field goal range with a chance to win the game.
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar thoughts, right? Like just as a whole, kind of as the whole game went on, it felt like in the beginning, Notre Dame felt kind of completely overall like first quarter, the fourth, like the better team. It was a matter of when if their offense was going to show up because like the first half was what I think a lot of people expected, low scoring, 10-3 going into half, right? And before that last drive, Notre Dame's offense, before the end of half, Notre Dame's offense had done nothing. Riley Leonard wasn't getting the ball down the field. They weren't even able to run the ball with Jeremiah Love, and it didn't look good. And then right before the end of the half, they go down there with Steve Angeli, I think is how you pronounce Angeli is how you pronounce his last name, gets in the game because Riley Leonard goes down and he leads them down on the 2-minute drill, down, gets the field goal 10-3. And that's kind of when it felt like the momentum completely flipped because Drew Aller was really not able to do much in the first half. Penn State offense looked better, but not by much. And Notre Dame's defense looked pretty good. And most of it, the reason I think Notre Dame looked better is because it's because Penn State's defense was really carrying that team. And then the second half, the script completely flipped. The 17 unanswered points by Notre Dame. That drive at the end of half clearly gave them momentum. I mean, Penn State's defense was still impressive. Dennis Sutton, 33, and Abdul Carter are both freaks of nature, and they were getting to the quarterback, even though Abdul was doing it on one arm. He was still getting there, which I think is actually going to help his draft stock a lot because that dude showed how freakishly athletic he is. But yeah, at the end of the day, it was just like Drew Aller couldn't do enough on offense, and Notre Dame's run game started to pick up too. And yeah, then the last kick at the end, which in college football, those can go either way. But I think even if that game goes into overtime, like I'd put just the way that game was trending, Notre Dame looked like the much better team. And then, yeah, Drew Aller kind of gets it, to put him in that position, right? Because he had a chance and just, made too many mistakes. And you can't do that in that situation, right? Because kind of on the pick, he was kind of throwing it out of a sack. And I know in the press conference, he said he was trying to throw it at his feet. But that kind of seemed like an excuse because in the game it really didn't look like he was forcing the ball in there, just stupid mistake. But if I remember, he's coming back next year. He's not a draft guy, so maybe they can get some stuff going. But the James Franklin narratives now will continue to roll, kind of like we'll talk about Ohio State, but kind of like the Ryan Day narratives have talked about not being able to win the big one. But yeah, overall, Notre Dame looked like, even though it was 27-24, the second half kind of told a different story, and I would say Notre Dame definitely looked like the much better team.
Yeah, I would definitely agree there. I feel like Penn State was kind of more of, they had some playmakers which kept them in the game. Like you talked around their D line, we know they got a lot of talent there. Singleton, I thought looked really good. I mean, he had 3 touchdowns, but I just thought running the ball, he looked like the best part of their offense. And then I forget the kid's name. I think it's like Warren, their tight end. He also actually played pretty well, especially considering that. I mean, Auer did not look good at all. Just he looked very inaccurate, very a little flustered, and so I definitely think he could benefit from another year at Penn State, even though this is a weaker class. But kind of moving on to the game tonight, who Notre Dame will face the winner of this Ohio State Texas game. I think this could be it'll be an interesting game. A lot of the Big Ten versus SEC narratives going on, seeing the fall of the SEC and, the rise of the Big Ten. So I feel like this will tell a big story here tonight. But I think Ohio State is a much more talented team, and I think they're definitely gonna win this game. I think it'll be like one of those games that you watch and it's like Ohio State kind of dominates it, but the score, may not tell the same story. It may not be, it may be closer than people think. And I think the reason for that is I think Texas is one of the best defenses Ohio State has played all year. I think they're better than Oregon. So like Ohio State dropping a crazy amount of points at Oregon doesn't really bother me because I think most of the time the SEC defenses seem to be able to contain the Big Ten offenses a little more. But I just think offensively, Texas and Quinn Ewers is not going to be able to keep up.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is going to be a story of the Ohio States. I mean, it's like you said, Big Ten and SEC football clashing. And the SEC hasn't really been the SEC this year. Like, kind of thing is what you're referring to. Like the SEC, I feel like over recent years is freak athletes, especially at positions like quarterback and receiver, who are going to stretch you vertically down the field. Right? They're going to throw the ball down the field. They're going to have good old linemen to protect their quarterback, and their quarterbacks are going to put up pretty ridiculous stats, right? I mean, you can go back in recent history and find some incredible receivers at places like Alabama and LSU, right? Devonta Smith, even going back to like Odell Beckham Jr., right? Like a lot of those products come out of the SEC because that's the style of ball they play, whereas the Big Ten, right, is what this Ohio State team is. It's a solid defense and an offense that can throw the ball but is more reliant on a run game. And I'll admit, like, I don't watch as much Big Ten football as I do SEC football, just being where we're at. But Texas, it's kind of like what you're saying, like this script, or not the script, but like the way the season has gone feels like this is adding up to an Ohio State win. Just because the SEC hasn't been the SEC quarterbacks aren't playing the same way. Quinn Ewers, played decent against Arizona State, but again, that's Arizona State, not Ohio State. I think they're in for kind of definitely a different style of game. I think they'll struggle in the first half. And they'll kind of be out. The defense, Ohio State's even watch out for. If there's one key player I would say to watch out for in this game, it's Jack Sawyer. That dude ravaged Tennessee's offense, made them look absolutely terrible. Whether he was getting to the quarterback or swatting ball out of the air, he did the same thing to Dylan Gabriel, right? Technically, Oregon's a Big Ten team, but they don't really play like a Big Ten team. They play actually more like an SEC team, I think, they get more horizontal across the field than vertical, but they play more like an SEC team, and we saw what Ohio State did to them. And so you mix those two games that Ohio State played, the one versus Oregon and the one versus Tennessee, it's a mix of what Texas does, right? It's an SEC team and another team that loves to throw the ball like Texas does. And to me, that just is not a good sign. That adds up to the facts that probably like we're gonna see is like I was looking at the line right now. Right now the line I think is Ohio State -5.5. Like I'd take that. I could see this as a blown out of the water game. My only like bold prediction, thing that maybe Texas could do to stay in the game is it would be interesting to see, right, in this theoretical world, if they go into half, not doing well, maybe down a couple scores or a few scores because their defense, has some guys and they might be able to stay in the game. If they go into half, Quinn Ewers has done nothing. Maybe he's even thrown a couple picks, taken a bunch of sacks. Like, do they turn to Archie Manning? They've done it during the regular season, right? And he gives you a different look. He gives you a different look on offense. He can run the ball so he can stretch that defense and kind of make them stay on their heels. So, if that happens, I could honestly see the game flipping, right? And I get Archie's young. He might not win the game, but I think it would be interesting to see him throw something different, or maybe just get him involved in the game, getting him in the game and running some quarterback options and stuff like that. But if it's Quinn Ewers from first to fourth quarter, then I'd say, yeah, I'd take Ohio State minus the 5.5. They get the job done and make it look pretty damn easy and glide into what will be I think will be a pretty crazy defensive, hard running game. Notre Dame versus Ohio State in the Natty.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of going back there with the Quinn Ewers thing, I guess it would be kind of a similar situation to what we saw Alabama do in the national championship with benching Hurts to play Tua. So I feel like in college football, it's not as ridiculous to see compared to like at an NFL level. Because I mean, Manning, I mean, you're correct. They have done it in games prior. He does have a couple starting games experience this year. And the way Quinn Ewers has been playing, he's been a lot of, some ups, but especially recently, a lot of down. And so if they do, I would not be crazy shocked if they made that swap at halftime. And so now I'm kind of going to hop straight into these wild card games. I'm just going to go by when they're going to be played. So the first one is actually the game with the lowest over under points scored at 42.5. So two very solid defenses going at it, and it will be the Chargers playing in Houston. This is an interesting game. The line right now is the Chargers are favored by 3. We know about the Texans' offensive struggles, especially recently. Even, with an injured Nico Collins, we thought it would, help a lot when they got him back, and it helped a little. But, it kind of felt like Joe Mixon's play went a little off, and it felt like Stroud just hasn't found what he wanted or what he had that rookie season. The Chargers on the other side I would say they've been playing pretty well recently down the stretch. Herbert's looked really good. I feel like he's finally having the year that everyone thought he would once he got a good head coach. They got Dobbins back, which is good for them because I feel like the run game they love to run the ball, and without Dobbins, it just feels non existent. But offensively, they've also had their struggles. I mean, they have Lad McConkey in the receiving core, but I mean, other than that, Quinn Johnson has had good games, but he's been on and off. Joshua Palmer has not been what people thought he would be this season. And so I definitely do agree. I think this will definitely be a defensive battle, as these are two premier defenses in the league. The Texans, kind of with that pass rush duo of Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr., will definitely get pressure on the Chargers. They have the home field advantage, but I think I'm going to go to Chargers here. And that's just, I think the Texans' offensive struggles are going to continue. This is not a game, maybe if it was a worse defense, you'd be like kind of hope Stroud could get a quick start in the playoffs, but this is kind of a tough defense to play. We have seen the Chargers, week in and week out getting stops. I know they have a good pass rush with Joey Bosa at the lead. We know they got playmakers back with Derwin James at safety, but I just feel like this is one of the defenses that's, they played well against premier offenses, and so I feel like it's going to be a low scoring game, but at the end of the day, I feel like Herbert's going to be able to make the plays that Shroud will not.
Yeah, I mean, I think defense is definitely the key to this game. I mean, if you look at the ranks, right? Like I get the ranks here, right here. Texans are the sixth best pass defense in the league, only giving up 201 yards of passing a game, and the Chargers are the seventh best, only giving up about 207 yards a game. And on the ground, it's similar, right? Houston is the number 11th against the run, only giving up 114, and the Chargers are the 14th, only giving up 118. And then scoring overall, the Chargers have the best defense, and Houston has the 14th, right? So just that one last stat, right? The two top 15 scoring defenses. And honestly, I would say that some of the reason the Texans um, aren't higher on that scoring stat is because of games like the Ravens game, right? Where they were, and they played some much tougher task. I would say in this game, though, what could be the difference is the fact that the Texans have played a much harder schedule. I mean, the Chargers really have not played a tough defense in a long time. They've played the Chiefs defense, which is good, but other than and Denver's defense is all right, but like as far as a pure like in a really good pass rush and two really good corners, I mean the Texans do that pretty well. And if you look at what the like think about what the Chargers are going to try to do, you would think that the Texans would be able to defend it. They're going to get to Herbert quick. They're not going to get Lad McConkey or Quentin Johnson or any of those guys get the ball down the field. And you would think on either side, if trying to get the ball to Lad McConkey, well, I would trust Stingley or Kamari Laster on Lad McConkey, no matter what side of the field he's on. So they're 3-point dogs at home, but again, and it's kind of similar to what you said, it's going to come down, in my opinion, if the Texans are going to win this game, to, I mean, whoever's going to win this game, to what the offense is going to do. And it's a hard choice because it's going to be, can Stroud do, what he's proven last year he can do, what he kind of did at the beginning of the season, but hasn't done in many, many weeks. And I think the biggest key here is that Bobby Slowick in offensive play calling needs to help him out. This ball needs to be coming out of Stroud's hand quick. It needs to be underneath stuff. Get Dalton Schultz involved in this game, right? We haven't seen much of him all year, right? And Stroud did so well last year, and Dalton Schultz had a pretty good year, right? Like, guys like Derwin James are going to not allow you to have Nico Collins over the top. We lost Tank Dell. Deontay Johnson will be a good distraction guy, and maybe he can run some intermediate stuff too. But I would love just, average. I would say for two keys for the Texans, get the ball out of Stroud's hand quick. And that's I think going to help open the run game too. And then number two is that have long sustained drives. This game you'll tell early, I think, which way this game's going to go. If the Texans' first few drives are 3 and outs, it'll probably be a loss because the defense. That's really how that Ravens game went. Even though neither side of the ball looked great, the defense just got exhausted. I mean, they put 2 points on the board. They were the only scores of the game, right? But then immediately the offense would get the ball back, three plays punt, right? That does nothing for your defense. Sometimes you got to make momentum on offense that can carry to your defense, because we've proven that the defense can get momentum and it won't carry to the offense. So it's asking a lot. I'm going to roll with my Texans just because that's my team. I got faith in them. I think they can do it. But at the end of the day, right? A lot of it's going to come down to, can Stroud and Slowick scheme up a game plan where the ball's coming out of his hands quick, we can get Mixon going on the ground, and then just sustaining drives. I was saying earlier, it's like, if that first drive, you got to have points. That should be a scripted drive you've worked on all week, and the Texans have been really bad at it. They did good in Tennessee last week against Tennessee starters, who are, they're not a bad defense. If you get a drive that looks like that, 7 points, 3 points, 8, 9 plays, 10 plays, that's a good start. Now, if you get the ball, or your defense gets a stop and you get the ball and you go 3 and out, that's a bad look. But I think the Texans will be able to get done. I think it stays relatively close. Do you want me to go ahead and do my parlay, or do you want to come back to those at the end?
Yeah, no, you can just see your parlay.
All right. So the parlay, I had this game because we kind of split these games. I had this game. And this was a harder game to put a parlay together because it's going to be a low-scoring game, and I don't like to take the under on yards and stuff. I feel like you risk too much when you do that, and it's a little weird. So number one, I got the under. I moved the under to 49.5. It was at, I think, 42.5. I took it at 49.5 at minus 330 on FanDuel. So the reason I did that, for one, since week 7, Houston has only had one game over 50 total points. And I feel like their defense is going to negotiate this game, right? It's going to be, can their defense stop Justin Herbert? It's, probably not going to be, can the Chargers defense stop CJ Stroud? We kind of know CJ Stroud and that Texans offense won't put up too many points. But for the over, it's going to be, how much are the Chargers going to do? So the Texans defense has only given up one game of over, or the Texans have only had one game over 50 total points since week 7. And then for the Chargers, in 7 games this year against top 15 defenses, only two of those games have gone over 50 total points. So, when they play top defenses, they tend to score less points than they usually do, obviously. But Texans being such a high defense, I feel like that game stays under 50 points. I also got Texans plus 7.5. I feel like because it's a low scoring game, it's going to be a close game. Right now it's at plus 3. I moved that to plus 7.5. And I feel like that's reasonable. I feel like the Texans don't lose this game by more than a touchdown. It might come down to a field goal or a 1 point game. And then my last thing I do have is Herbert over 25 rush yards. This was a hard one to pick because I wanted to pick a prop, but again, with this being a defensive game, that's hard. The reason I picked this one is because Houston has struggled against rushing quarterbacks this year. Against Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, he had 4 rushes for 87 yards. Against KC, Mahomes had 5 rushes for 33 yards. Anthony Richardson in the game had 6 rushes for 45 yards. And then when they played the Bills, Josh Allen had 4 rushes for 54 yards. And Herbert has been, ever since he got healthy, right at the beginning of the year, he was kind of not feeling great. He wasn't really running, but now that he seems to be back to, feeling the best as he has, he's back to running the ball. So he's rushed for 24 or 25 or more yards against top 15 defenses like the Titans, the Broncos, and the Raiders, and top 15 total defense. And since the bye week, yeah, he's gotten a lot more opportunities. So I got the under 49.5, Houston plus 7.5, Herbert 25 or more rushing yards, and that adds up to plus 296. So like about plus 300 for those three. I feel like this would not be my first. If like you were looking at the games this weekend, you're like, which one do you want to pick to put, maybe a parlay down? I would not make this the first because defensive games are so hard to gamble on. But I feel like those picks are definitely the ones I like the most in this one.
Yeah, it's definitely that's a thing with sports gambling is you definitely want one of those more electric games, and we'll talk about. There's definitely a few here that you have your good options if you want to put down a parlay. But however, this next game on Saturday is also not one you probably want to put down a parlay on. With another low total over under at 43.5. You have the home team favored by 9.5 in a division showdown with the Steelers having to go to Baltimore to play the Ravens. I think this will be actually more interesting than people think. I mean, I know for one, if I'm the Ravens, I don't want to play my division rival in a wild card round. I know, the Steelers have not looked great recently, and even though they split the series, Baltimore beat them pretty cleanly in the most recent outing. But I mean, this is still a team that did beat you earlier in the regular season, and I mean, just a great defense. And so we know the Ravens have had their offensive struggles in the postseason before. We know the signing of Derrick Henry, maybe that's what was about to stop it. Maybe they're just going to keep this ball in the ground. But I think, when you look into this game being a division game and how good the Steelers defense is, I honestly think this game is going to be a lot closer than what the 9.5 favorite says. I think, the Steelers are going to have to go to Baltimore. It doesn't look like it's going to be pretty, but I feel like guys like T.J. Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, the Steelers team has playmakers. Like they have playmakers to keep them in this game. Of course I'm still going to go with Baltimore, uh, and I think what it's just going to come down to is I think This is where the signing of Derrick Henry is really going to show out. I think this is going to be pretty low scoring. I think the issue is going to be the Steelers are not going to be able to put a lot on the board. And I think once the Ravens get even a decent lead, they're just going to keep it on the ground with Henry. And that's kind of going to be like, I think that's what we're going to see throughout with this Ravens team in the playoffs. Is once they get a lead, they're just going to keep the ball on the ground, whether that's with Henry or maybe even having a few design runs for Lamar, just kind of to chew that clock and end the game because I feel like their recent failures have been due to forcing a pass game that just wasn't there. Like I will be an advocate to say, like I don't think I would not be scared of any of these Ravens receivers. We know Zay Flowers is out, so that's their best target. So now you have Bateman that's going to have to step up into that receiver one position. Andrews has been really good in the red zone, but I just feel like they don't have any vertical threat, which again goes in the favor of the Steelers just being able to stop them more often. So I feel like this will be a low scoring game Both teams will probably run the ball a lot, but I think the Ravens will be able to come out on top.
Yeah, with this one, it's an interesting one because no Zay Flowers for the Ravens completely changes this game. If Zay Flowers is in this game, I would say the 9.5 does or whatever it is. Ravens minus 9.5 doesn't look that insane because Lamar's been so good through the air. The Steelers really don't have a great pass defense. They rank 25th in pass defense in the league, but he's out, right? So he's out. That takes the deep shot kind of away from this offense, and you're gonna have to rely more on both your run game and your more intermediate passing game, right? No Deontay Johnson, like obviously we know that stuff happens, so they kind of don't really have a huge threat down the field, and so it's going to come down to right when what Henry can do. And Jackson has been decent. I think even without Zay Flowers, he'll still find a way against this defense. Because if I'm the Steelers, you load the box this game. No Zay Flowers, you don't have to worry about that much over the top. You trust your pass rushers, but we want to stop the run, right? So you're probably going to load the box and then be like, if we're going to lose, Jackson's going to beat us, not Henry. And so then it comes down to the question, well, can Jackson beat him? And my answer to that would be yes. I think he's too good with his arm and his legs. So really just with his arm, because I think they're going to try to negate his running in this game. And I think he's good enough to do it. So I would definitely pick the Ravens in this game. I think, yeah, without Zay Flowers, the points are a little much. Moving into, because this was the other one I had the parlay for. Moving into the parlay, this is what I got for this one. I have Jackson over 200 passing yards. Again, I think they're going to force him at the beginning of this game to pass the ball. I think they're going to say, we're going to stop Henry and we're going to make you pass the ball. But I think where Lamar is going to kind of prove how good he really is and how, why he's been taken so seriously in this MVP campaign this year and why he's played so good. So I got Jackson throwing for 200 plus passing yards. He's only had 4 games all year where he's been under 200 yards. The next thing I got is a Derrick Henry touchdown. With it being cold in Baltimore, I think Lamar gets him down the field, but then Henry ends up getting it in. This just feels like it's a game too where, like the narrative I see this game going is kind of like what you were talking about, where they start doing enough, and then by the end, they're just, the Ravens are just handing it to Derrick Henry. So I got Henry to anytime touchdown. I also have a Mark Andrews 4+ receptions. I think without Zay Flowers, Lamar's going to have to look for other options, and all year his second option has been the tight end, whether it's been what's his name, Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews. And as of the last few weeks, it's been shifted back to Mark Andrews. So I got Andrews over 4 receptions. And then the last one I got is Henry over 70 rushing yards. Again, I think by the end of this game, kind of like you were saying, the Ravens are going to control this game. He'll in this game with 20 to 25 carries. That'll easily put him over 70 yards. Last game they played, he had like 126 yards rushing against the Steelers. So, and also just like a little like nugget on that one, Henry's only had 3 games this year under 70 yards. None of them he had 20 carries. One of them he had 16. One of them was against the Giants, and he was pulled early because they were winning so big. And then the last one was against the Bengals, and that was like a score for score kind of game where they were going back and forth, through the air. This is definitely not going to be one of those games, so I think that's pretty easy. So with the Lamar Jackson 200 passing yards, the Henry TD, Andrews 4+ receptions, and Derrick Henry 70 yards on the ground, that's a plus 313. And if you want to bundle it with a Ravens money line, because I just see no way in heck the Steelers win this. I think I don't know. I don't even know if it might be. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but it'll be one of those games where even if it's close at the end, like the whole time you knew the Ravens were going to win. I mean, the Steelers have lost like their last 3 or 4 games in a row. They looked terrible in the last game against the Ravens. So if you want to bundle it with a Ravens money line, even though it's not worth more, that'll boost it on FanDuel to plus 354. I wouldn't even mind that. But yeah, I think the Ravens handle the Steelers and look just from beginning to end, the much better team.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you here. Having to play an MVP candidate at home, it's definitely going to be a tough task for the Steelers. It'd just be hard seeing them go away with that one. And just kind of another game I think is going to be tough for the underdog is going to be the Broncos going into Buffalo to play Josh Allen and the Bills. This game has a 47.5 over under, so one of the more higher scoring games of the weekend, and Buffalo is favored at 8.5. So I'm just gonna say it. I think Buffalo will win. I think this will be the most dominating performance of the wild card weekend for a couple reasons. I think this is a little different Josh Allen than we've seen in past playoff years. He's been doing it without a true number one receiver, which I think is very impressive. I mean, Amari Cooper kind of got traded midseason, but they haven't. He's kind of been still like kind of getting in the offense. So maybe we can see a more usage of him in the playoffs. But I think I want to say Shakir probably leads them in yards from what I've been seeing at least. So I think Allen. This is a very good Broncos defense, but I think Allen is just going to be able to put a lot of points on the board. And I mean, we know rookie quarterbacks in the playoffs do have their struggles. I believe we have two this year in the playoffs, and Bo Nix is one of them. I mean, I think with Sean Payton, it will definitely help. Great play caller, great offensive mind, but I think this Buffalo defense, although they're not great, I think they will still be able to make plays against this Broncos offense, who, in my opinion, has very little run game. Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin have not gone off to the start or even had the season that you'd like to see. It looks like Javante has not fully recovered from his injury a year ago, and Jaleel McLaughlin just has not been there. And so I feel like Sean Payton is usually like to run that West Coast offense with a run game. And so without that, I feel like, you're taking away one more thing he likes to do. And so I feel like going into Buffalo, you're going to not only have to deal with the crowd, but you're going to have to deal with the weather that comes with it because you already know it's going to be freezing cold, possibly a snow game. I haven't looked at the weather yet, but that wouldn't shock me either. I know Denver has had some of those, but I feel like in Buffalo, I don't. I feel like we see teams struggle more often against the weather than they do in other places. And then once again, just having to go up against an MVP candidate. We know Josh Allen is a huge playmaker. I know there's been narratives of him not having success in the playoffs this season, but just watching him throughout the regular season, it looked different. It looked like that he was, it wasn't like just him and Diggs kind of throughout the whole season, and then they took away Diggs in the postseason, and it's like, what do we do now? Like this has been an offense that has been able to find a lot of players. We know James Cook has been great near the goal line, and they've been able to finish drives that way. We know Allen has been able to use his legs to pick up first downs. So I feel like this Buffalo offense will just kind of overwhelm this Denver defense, and they'll be able to come out with an easy win in Buffalo.
Yeah, I think maybe we see this game a little bit different. I mean, so I looked at the weather, just for like kind of the parlay sake, because this is my last parlay game on Sunday. So it's a Sunday noon game. Temperatures are low 20s with maybe some snow flurries. They look like there'll be snow on the ground, but they'll have plenty of time to clear it out before the game starts. So it's not ridiculous amount of snow. So it's definitely not taking away from the passing game. I don't think like it won't be too wet, and so you'll still be able to see it through the air, which I actually think definitely helps the Broncos over the Bills, and also with that may in Denver, I don't think it bothers them playing in these temperatures as much. For this one, I think it definitely could be closer than people think. I know it's a rookie quarterback, and I completely agree that Josh Allen is having an incredible year without a ton of threats, but I don't know. I've just been impressed with how much better the Broncos have gotten over especially the last few weeks. I mean, they're definitely the hotter team coming into this game, and as their offense is clicking in all cylinders. Like I know that last game was against the Chiefs backup, so you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. But in that game, they looked terrific. In games before that, I know in the Bengals game, right, that game didn't end the way they wanted it to. And I'm not saying the Broncos are going to win this game, but I don't see it being like just a blowout. Like I think Sean Payton finds a way to stay in this game. So talking about this game, I think for me it'll be best just to get into the parlay because I'll kind of explain how I see it. But real quick, looking at again the defensive ranks for these teams, I think the key here for this game is the pass defenses for both these teams, because against these are two good run defenses. Denver's the number 3 rush defense in the league, only allowing 96 yards, and the Bills are the number 12 defense, allowing only 115 yards on the ground. But against the pass, both these teams kind of have their struggles. Denver is number 19, allowing 221, and the Bills are the 24th worst pass defense in the league. And I think that could be key for the Broncos if they can get the ball. It looks like they're going to be able to throw the ball with the weather. It's not going to be too bad, and I think that'll really benefit them. So looking at the parlay I got Broncos plus 10.5. I think with the weather mixed in with the just kind of the momentum that the Broncos are coming into this game with, and the way their offense has been playing, and playing a Bills pass defense that has really struggled, I think they can stay in this game. I don't see them losing by more than 2 scores, so plus 10.5 seem pretty safe to me. That's at minus 146. The next thing I have is Sutton, Cordell Sutton, I think it was 60 receiving yards. That's at minus 225. Sorry, the other thing I missed them. So for that Broncos plus 10.5, the Broncos have only lost by 10 or more points one time this season, and that was against the Ravens when they lost 31-10 much earlier in the year. So the Broncos stay in games. They got a pretty good point differential. They stay pretty close in games. For Sutton 50 plus receiving yards minus 225. The reason I got that one is, already because the Bills' pass defense struggles, and also they've proven they struggle against number 1 receivers. They struggled against Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they struggled against other teams whenever they played within the division. Guys like Garrett Wilson had pretty big games. Even Kevin Booty for the Patriots, I guess he would kind of be their number 1, even though he's not a clear number 1. He had decent games, so they struggle against number 1 receivers. So I think Cordell Sutton will have a pretty big game. And then the last thing I got for this one, the last leg, is a Josh Allen anytime touchdown. Because I do see this is still a Buffalo winter game, going to be a little cold. Playoffs, I feel like he always finds a way in these playoff games to get into the end zone, and that's at plus 135. So total with Broncos plus 10.5, Sutton 50 plus receiving yards, and a Josh Allen touchdown, that adds up to plus 328. Total. Also, another little anecdote that Denver has allowed a rushing touchdown to both Anthony Richardson when they played them, and their defense allowed quarterbacks like Justin Herbert, who are more mobile, to kind of get out in front of him, and he ran for about 30 yards when they played him in a game when he was healthy. So they have had those struggles a little bit against rushing quarterbacks. They were a little better against Jackson, but also Jackson was just slinging it through the air, and I bet they felt no need to run him. So yeah, that's the parlay I got for that one. As far as a pick, I still think the Bills will get the win. Again, just too much playing at home. But I think the Broncos play a little better than expected. I think the Ravens Steelers game has a much more likelihood of being a blowout than this Broncos Bills game does.
Yeah, so it is interesting to see, we kind of got our, debates there, and we could definitely, if we have a little more time at the end, we could definitely go back to those two. But I definitely want to get to these last 3 games towards the end. And so I believe the next one time slot would be oh no, my bad. There's only 2 more games. Yeah, it's a rematch of the Brazil. I believe that was a week 1 opener, the Brazil game. And that's the Packers going, and this time they'll have to go to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. Eagles are favored by 5.5 on what I have here on ESPN. Over under 45.5. And honestly, I think this will be an interesting game. Jordan Love is cleared to play. They did miss Christian Watson due to that injury in the last week of the season. And so, I mean, that's, maybe not the biggest loss. They're pretty deep at receiver. But the thing with Christian Watson is he is their deep threat. So I feel like that will take a little bit away from their passing game, but it will bring in guys like Bo Melton and Dontavian Wicks in the game, which we've seen have big games before. I think the key thing for me picking Philadelphia here is just how good their defense has been lately. I feel like last year we saw this Eagles team go into the playoffs and get upset by, I believe, a 9-win Tampa team. and that is like people are like, oh, they can't do it ever since they won the Super Bowl. But for me, this just looks like a different Eagles team. Like this looks like a team that could be at the top of the NFC. I mean, and just looking defensively, they're number one in yards per game, and the team below them is the Titans, and they're actually basically up by 40 yards per game. They're the only team that allows less than 300 yards per game, which is crazy impressive. They allow less than 200 yards in the air, and on the ground, they have that's kind of their weak suit, but they're still, I believe, yeah, they're still top 10. It's like this is a really good defensive unit. This is a defensive unit that in recent games has been looking really good, even with Jalen Hurts being out. And so I think the narrative of this game is just going to be for the Packers to win, they're going to need Jordan Love to make big plays against this defense, which I just don't see happening because you have his deep threat receiver is gone, so that puts a lot more pressure on Jaden Reed, who I believe would be their second best vertical threat, but he's kind of not been used that way at all this season. And then just another thing with Philadelphia, I mean, this is the best rushing attack in the league. I mean, they have the best running back in the league. Almost beat Dickerson's record, but sat out the last week. But that means he's fresh. He didn't get any playing time, so he's going to be fresh. And so I feel like even though the Packers' run defense is pretty solid, that they're just going to be running Barkley a lot once they get a lead early. And I feel like with Jordan Love, as much as I do like Love, and I'd like to see him succeed. I think this is just a tough contest for him because I mean, going into Philly already, but now you got to play the best defense in the league. But I mean, in my opinion, this is by far the best defensive unit in the league. Of course, so the last Oh, okay. I was right. There's 3 games. So the last 3 games are my parlays. I use underdog, so I have the multiplier on them in underdog. So that will kind of be interesting. I don't have the odds, but I'm sure you should be able to find it on FanDuel pretty easy. But my first one, I'm not afraid to go under. I'm going to go Jordan Love under 221 passing yards. Like I said earlier, the Eagles average 170 passing yards a game. This is a very good pass defense, and especially with the emergence of Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, 2 very good young rookie corners. It's like this is not a defense you're going to want to pass against. I think if Green Bay wants any chance of staying in this game, they're going to have to keep this ball on the ground, and they're going to probably want to keep it low scoring because Green Bay does have a solid defense, and the Eagles have had their offensive struggles. So that's how, in my opinion, if I'm LaFleur, that's how I'm thinking. So that goes into my next leg, which is Josh Jacobs over 79.5 rushing yards. Like I said earlier, this is a good defense, but the best way to attack them is on the ground. So this is a game that if you're Green Bay, I think you're going to use your playmaker in Josh Jacobs. I think he's your most consistent offensive weapon. I mean, he had 13,000 yards this year, 15 touchdowns. And so I feel like I see Josh Jacobs getting a lot of work in this game against Philadelphia. We know he's a workhorse. There's really no one else there in Green Bay who's going to take carries. And then my third leg kind of goes what I was talking with early. I have Barkley over 89.5. He's fresh. The Eagles are going to keep most games on the ground unless they're getting blown out. I think they're going to get a lead here early, and they're just going to try to keep it on the ground to chew out the clock, and they're going to rely on that pass defense, which is very good. In fact, I mean, by far the best in the league. All the other pass defenses that are kind of near there are just teams that either aren't good against the run, so teams are just running it, or teams that have just had bad records. So you just run the ball, to end the game quicker.
Yeah, for this game, I won't spend as much time since this was kind of your parlay game. I didn't do as much research on it as you did, but I would say, yeah, I would definitely. It seems like I like just from that, like the way you were leaning is more Eagles, and that's kind of the way I'm leaning too. It's kind of a matter too of just the fact, yeah, like the defense when Hurts went down, the Eagles defense definitely stepped up. The way Barkley's playing, right? He's the hot hand right now. Best probably, probably is the best running back in the league right now. And yeah, even though the Packers have a pretty good run defense, I just see that defense struggling to stop, a healthy Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley playing at the top of his game, and then both of them coming back on the field together for when it's been a minute since they both played. I think it's too much for that defense, and then so then it becomes a game of who's going to make the bigger plays. Which I would definitely lean more the Eagles than the Packers because I feel like it's also gotten to the point this season where you just never know with Jordan Love, right? What if he takes a hit and goes down, right? You don't know. I feel like a few times this year he's taken hits and go down. And they didn't look good to end the year. The Bears game, they looked sloppy. And they I didn't watch that game, so they might have not been really playing starters or whatever, but it looked like Jordan Love started that game. So games before that, they didn't look great. So I definitely also lean the Eagles in this game. Um, just because, it's like that offense with Hurts back healthy and Barkley playing the way he did all year is going to be tough to stop. And then on top of that, like you said, the Eagles defense stepping up when they needed to when Hurts went down and playing the way they did. I think it's going to prove too much for the Packers offense.
Yeah, I think that will definitely be one of the more interesting games of the weekend, in my opinion, just with, two very good run games. It could be, honestly, more low scoring than people might think, but I'm just going to hop into what could be the highest scoring game of the weekend, and that's going to be the Commanders traveling to Tampa Bay to take on the Bucks. And honestly, I think this is the hardest game to pick. I think I could see this game going either way, and so I'm just gonna I kind of talk about my parlay, what I put down, and kind of the way I'm thinking. Um, and so for my parlay, my first one is Brian Robinson over 46 and a half rushing yards. That's not a lot of rushing yards. I know this Tampa is really good against the run, this Tampa defense, but I feel like Dan Quinn is not going to want to, Daniels has been really good this season. Uh, but I feel like they're going to not want to put, the game completely in their rookie quarterback's hands. Usually we have seen, I think rookies in playoff games are usually not that good. Last year, Stroud had the exceptional, crazy good game against the Browns, and then the next round, when we saw him play, in my opinion, an actual more competent team against the Ravens, that's when we started to see the struggle. So this is actually a very underrated Bucks defense. They do struggle against the pass, but they're very good against the run. They don't allow them a lot of points, and so just because they're not good against the pass, I have McLaurin over 60 yards. Again, it's actually 59 and a half. But again, not a lot of yards. He's, in my opinion, he is the vital piece in that passing game. So for to help Jane Daniels, he's gonna try to find McLaurin. That's his number one. No one else is really close. I mean, Zach Ertz has been playing well down the stretch, but even him, if you look at the receiving numbers, targets and receptions and yards, he's just nowhere near McLaurin. So I feel like if the Commanders are going to want to have success on this Bucs defense, which I see them having a little success, it's going to probably be through the air, and so that's why I got the McLaurin over 60 yards. I know that kind of takes away from the B Rob. It's like, well, if they aren't they just going to continue to throw the ball? But it's like, I mean, first of all, 50 yards is not that much, especially for Brian Robinson, who's starting to become more and more healthy. And as he becomes more and more healthy, he's starting to become the lead back on for at least for first and second down. He's not a great pass catcher, but that doesn't really make a case in the rushing yards. And then so for my last line, I have a Bucky Irving anytime touchdown, and so that's where I'm kind of going to go. Is I think Bucky Irving is going to be like the MVP of this game, and I think that's how Tampa's going to win at home. The Commanders are very bad against the run. They're one of the worst in the league. They're bottom five in the league against the run, and Bucky Irving has just had the hot hand since he took over that starting role from Rashad White. And so I have him an anytime rushing touchdown here. I feel like that's the safest one because his yards line is blown up. I think on underdog it was like 107. And so it's like for me, I was like, oh, that's a little more risky than a touchdown, and they were at the same, multiplier. So that's why I went there. But I mean, and definitely on other sports books, if you can find like I would say over 70, maybe even over 80 yards for Bucky Irving, I would definitely put that down in a parlay because I feel like he's just going to have a big game against this weak run defense. We've seen Tampa run the ball successfully against other teams, especially with the Chris Godwin's. We know he's been out, and I feel like ever since the absence of Godwin, Mike Evans has been playing better, and they had McMillan step up a little bit, but the passing game's just not there. They're that's they usually kind of been more of an air raid kind of system, but now since the emergence of Irving, they've kind of kept the ball on the ground more. Um, and so I feel like there's no reason at home. There's no reason they shouldn't continue that against the Commanders. And I feel like this will be the closest game of the slate. But they're just going to come out with the win. And I think Bucky Irving, I could see him having multiple touchdowns and over 100 yards on the ground.
Yeah, for this one, it comes down to me just from as far as I mean, I don't know. Like you definitely done more looking into as far as what the game's gonna look like. To me, it comes down to right like Baker Mayfield versus Jaden Daniels. Like Daniels had a good year, but Baker's just the more experienced guy in a position like this. This is his first rodeo. He's used to play. I mean, he's played in quite a few playoff games by now. He's played in quite a few in Tampa. He's played on the road. He played at the Lions last year. Played a decent game, and I think they're just able to get the job done. I like Bucky Irving. I mean, I haven't looked into the Commanders' run game or the run defense or anything like that. But I do like what you say about Bucky Irving. I like the way he runs the ball. He's definitely been the hot hand this year. He's got it, and he's kind of seems like he's back healthy. I know he had some injury struggles throughout the year where he was kind of in and out, and his carries were being limited. But it's the playoffs now, right? So the cap of what you can you're going to be pushed to your max in each of these games because you're trying to if you lose you're out. So got to win to stay in. So yeah, I think the Bucks handle this. As far as I don't think it'll be a blowout, but again, I think it'll be one of those. I mean, it could. I agree with you. It could be close. It probably will be close because you can't count out Jaden Daniels. Now, I would say, and we might disagree on this, is that I do think Jaden Daniels is more likely to have kind of a rookie, deer in the headlights game than Bo Nix is. Because I think Bo Nix has a lot more help as far as a game plan that's going to suit his needs, and he's progressed a lot better. Or a lot more quickly in these last few weeks where he's looked really good than Jaden Daniels had. Man, we know Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin is an iconic duo, and there's no taking away from that. Um, but I do think that just the way I don't know, the way the Buccaneers offense is played is they're going to be too much on the ground and through the air. Also, a key matchup in this game to keep your eyes on. It's kind of the reigniting of the rivalry between Lattimore, who will be back this week, and Mike Evans. So that's definitely a matchup that people are going to want to be keeping their eyes on. See if it gets kind of edgy and kind of frisky down there on the outside at that X position with the number one cornerback, and that should be a fun matchup to watch as those two always have some classic back and forths, and how will that affect the Bucks, right? But I got faith in Baker. I think he'll find other matchups if Mike Evans is out of the game, and so yeah, I got the Bucks in this one, and probably a close one though. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely just want to say I definitely agree with you on that Jane Daniels statement. I just think Sean Payton, once again, I'll always praise Sean Payton. I think he's one of the greatest offensive minds, and his game plan is going to kind of put him in a rare where we've seen Bo Nix, he has more experience. I agree with that, but I think the offensive game plan is just going to be easier for Bo Nix to execute compared to this Commanders team, which, I mean, Jane Daniels has been great this season. A lot of it, though, has came from, I feel like, kind of improvising or scrambling out the pocket. Like he is their leading rusher, and so I feel like in a playoff game, like you said, if he kind of you freeze there for a little bit, it can definitely cause stuff like that to shut down. But hopping into the last game we're going to cover, it's a Monday night game. Vikings actually, even though they're 14-3, they will be traveling not to LA but to Arizona, which I feel like it definitely hurt the Rams' case in this game a little bit. I definitely think for the worst division winner, this is actually a very solid Rams team. They got a lot of playmakers. We've seen Stafford do it before as a veteran. We know what Kyron can do. Puka has been putting up a good season since his injury. He's looked really good. But it comes down to this Rams defense has not been playing. Recently, they've been a little bit better, but they have not been playing nearly as good as this Vikings defense, and so that's why I think Minnesota's going to get the win. I feel like this Vikings defense is not going to be able to completely shut down this Ravens offense, but I feel like they're gonna, or this Rams offense, but I do feel like they will kind of be able to put their offense in a position to win. We know Sam Darnold did have this struggle against the Lions on, I believe that was Sunday night, yeah, which is kind of why they're in this scenario where they don't get the bye. But I feel like this will be a good bounce back for them. The Rams are really good at putting pressure on the quarterback, but I think Kevin O'Connell will be able to kind of game plan in a way where Sam Darnold will be able to get that ball out quick and will be able to find his weapons like Hawkinson, Jefferson, and Addison. So I'm just going to kind of hop straight into my parlay here and just kind of explain. So my first one is Matthew Stafford under 38.5 passing yards. I feel like this Vikings defense, led by Brian Flores, is really good. They've been playing, getting better as the season's been going on. I know you look against the pass, they don't look as good as you would think the way I'm talking about them, but they kind of allowed some big explosive games. But I feel like this won't be one. This will be one where they can hold Stafford below the 238 mark. Also, Stafford, I believe, has only hit that mark once in his last 5 games, and it was against a like bottom five defense. My second will be Justin Jefferson over 87.5 receiving yards. He hits this, I think, I want to say like 6 out of the last 6 games. He's hit it 4 times. One time being against that Lions game that was last weekend, and the other time I think he was like 5 yards off. And in a playoff game, Minnesota, win or go home, you're gonna find your best player, and that's Justin Jefferson. They're gonna do anything they can to get the ball in his hands and just kind of let him go to victory. And it's kind of what we talked about, what I was talking about with Sam Darnold earlier. We know the Rams are going to get pass rush. We know what Jared Verse and Braden Fisk can do. They've been really good this year as a rookie duo. So you're going to get this ball out quick. You're going to want to, get this, swing it out, give it to your playmakers, and let them do the rest of the work. And so I feel like that's why I feel like Jefferson could definitely have a big game. This Rams secondary doesn't really have a number one shutdown corner, and so I feel like Jefferson will be fine. My last one is Kyron Williams, anytime rushing touchdown. He actually had the streak, I believe, for like most consecutive games was a rushing touchdown, and recently got broke sometime this season. When the Rams are in the red zone, they're giving the ball to Kyron. It's just what they do. They've had the most success with it ever since his rookie season. Um, and I mean, it just continued this season. He has 14 touchdowns on the season, and he was out a couple of games. It's just when they get down to that first and goal situation, I would expect McVay to put the ball in Kyron's hands and just kind of allow him to finish that drive.
Yeah, for this one, I mean, yeah, like just to hit on that last point, it's like Kyron Williams, anytime touchdown, take it to the bank every week. That dude is like a guaranteed. That was like the bet of the year this year, it seemed. But as far as the game goes, I'd see this as the blowout game of the week. I just think, right, like I understand the Rams have Puka Nakua, they have Cooper Cup, the offense look better, Kyron Williams is talented enough, and like they've proven like again that Bills game that they can score on offense. Now, I would say if they're going to win, if they want to keep in this game or win this game, they're going to have to turn it into that Bills game because I think the Vikings are going to come into this game. They're going to be pissed off, right? Because of what they were pretty much embarrassed in Detroit, right? I mean, that was, not as close as it needed to be. It was a chance to have the bye, and, they lost all that, and they didn't look good. So, you could take that one of two ways. You can say, oh, wow, that's not a good way to go in the playoffs. Or you could take it as use that as motivation. And I think, especially with the Flores DC and the way Kevin O'Connell, I think, runs things there, I think they're going to come into this game with something to prove. And I think, they're going to win pretty big. I think the defense, maybe Matthew Stafford does some stuff in the pass game and Nakua and Cup do a little bit. I think the offense for the Vikings is going to be clicking on all cylinders. Rams defense is not going to be able to stop Jefferson and Addison, and I know Jones is questionable, but I think they look much better than they did against the Lions. They get back on track, and it actually proved people are going to be like, oh, it's going to be a positive narrative, right? Because the Lions now have a bye week that kills momentum. I think the Vikings are going to, it kind of ruined their momentum that week, but they're going to pick it up this week, and that's going to help them going into the next week of the playoffs. So I have the Vikings. I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings even win pretty big in this game. Just because the Rams talented, sure. Their defense is not. And I think, right, it's going to come down to the defense having something to prove, right? And guys like Greener are going to get to the quarterback and make big plays. And really, again, Vikings pretty big.
Yeah, so that will kind of just to recap our wild card weekend we had. I believe we did not disagree on a winner. We had all the home teams winning.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and I want to say all the favorites. Because from what I had, Tampa was favored in that game. I think
Well,
that would be the closest one.
I had the Texans. See, I thought you had the
That's
Chargers.
true. You're right. You had the
So
Texans, and
they're
then I
home
had the
though.
Chargers. So that's the first. We split on the first game. So you had all home. I had the Chargers winning on the road. It'll be interesting to see. I should have done a little more research before this to see like what percentage of home teams win, and maybe that would have swayed my mind on a few games. But yeah, just to recap, I think the things we disagreed was that game, this, and then just kind of our blowouts. We said one game will be a blowout, and we just kind of had different views on which one it would be. But I'm ready to go. I think unless you have anything extra you want to add on.
No, I think that kind of covers. Yeah, it should be a fun week of games. This I feel like a lot of people are have been hit with some nasty weather, whether it's in Los Angeles or the snow. A lot of people are getting in the country, so it'll be a good distraction from this kind of some of the stuff that's going on in places like there, and should be a good week of football. Yeah, the home team thing is kind of interesting. It'd be again the stat on that. I don't know what that is, but. Should be some good football, especially some of those games. I feel like there are teams with stuff to prove. There are teams that we don't know who's going to show up, what kind of team's going to show up. Just because they've even teams like the Texans, right, been inconsistent. Teams like the Eagles, what Eagles are going to show up? The Packers, are the Packers going to show up? So it's playoff time. It's a new season. It's win or go home now. So I think it'll be a fun week of games. We definitely disagree, but I think that's part of the playoffs, especially in NFL. You just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed our first episode. Um, if you want to see more like this, I believe next week we're going to be doing kind of more predictions for the divisional round, kind of recap how the wild card round went, and maybe some of our either our parlays or kind of our predictions, and then we'll probably talk a little bit about the college football national championship. I'm not as knowledgeable about that, so most of the stuff I'm saying take it with a grain of salt on college football, but hey, NFL football, that's where I do my research. Anyways, have a good day or night whenever you're watching this, and like and subscribe if you like the podcast.